In this video, I'm not going to try to prove anything because I can't make sense of it all. But I'm going to start here with this FBI document. On December 7th, 1963, Harry McCormick of the Dallas Morning News advised the Dallas office of the FBI that in February 1963, a friend of his, Gwyn Gasaway, 3708 Armstrong, had written a letter to the editor, which letter had been published in his paper. As a result of this letter being published, Mrs. Gasaway received an anonymous communication signed A Worker. McCormick said on November 24, 1963, the Dallas Morning News carried a facsimile of Lee Harvey Oswald's letter to John Connally, Secretary of the Navy. Mr. McCormick said Mrs. Gasaway saw this facsimile letter of Oswald's in the paper and has told him she believes that the handwriting in the facsimile and the handwriting in the anonymous communication she received are the same. McCormick was advised by Mrs. Gasaway that the original anonymous letter which she received had been turned over to the FBI by her in February 1963. The anonymous communication dated February 16, 1963, signed A Worker, postmarked February 16, 1963, Dallas, Texas. Gasaway was located in Dallas files and forwarded to the FBI laboratory on December 9, 1963, for comparison with the known handwriting of Lee Harvey Oswald, for the purpose of determining whether the anonymous communication was or was not written by Oswald. Under the date of December 11, 1963, the FBI laboratory advised as follows concerning a document examination requested by Dallas office on December 9, 1963. Specimens received 12/10/63, Q51, envelope postmarked Dallas, Texas, February 16, 5:30 p.m., 1963, addressed to Mrs. Gwyn Gasaway, 3708 Armstrong, Dallas, Texas, and accompanying one-page handwritten letter dated 2/16/63, captioned regarding your letter in the Times Herald, 2/16, and signed yours truly, A Worker. Result of examination, it was concluded that Q251 was not written by Lee Harvey Oswald. So Mrs. Gasaway wrote a letter to the editor, which I have not seen, I haven't been able to find, and she got a letter from A Worker before the assassination that she thought matched the writing of Lee Harvey Oswald that she had seen a sample of in the newspaper. But she had given the letter to the FBI in February of 1963 already. The FBI checked it out after the fact and said it wasn't Oswald's handwriting, and none of this material, so far as I can tell, is available for us to see now. Now, the reason that this seemed so significant to me was that Gasaway is a somewhat unusual name, at least in Dallas. In 1963, it's unusual, according to the phone book. And we have another Gasaway in the story, that is JD Tippit's wife. Her maiden name was Gasaway. However, in 1952 at least, according to this document, JD Tippit spelled her family name Gasway, that is Gasway. And in 1964, this press photo identifies her brother and calls him Gasway, the same way that JD Tippit spelled it in 1952. So maybe her name isn't Gasaway, maybe it's Gasway. But in FBI reports, her name is Gasaway with one S, which is yet another spelling. But in the 1940 census, the family name is Gasaway with two S's, which is just the way that Gwyn Gasaway apparently spells her name. So with my flame of hope still alive, I go looking for Gwyn Gasaway in the 1961 phone book, which is the one I have access to, and she's not in there under that name. But at the address given for her by the FBI is a Gwyn G. Chandler. In my view, this must be the same person, but she, in 1961 anyway, she's listed under a different name. And with this information, I go looking some more, go Googling some more, and I find her Find a Grave page. And now her name is Gay Gwyn Greer Gasway. That's with two Z's now. And Greer, in my view, Greer is without a doubt one of the people who shot JFK. So now my flame is burning bright. And reading from the Find a Grave page, we find out that she was married to Andrew Jackson Post Jr. on September 4th, 1946 in Connecticut. And if you look around a bit, you can determine that Andrew Jackson Post Jr. was from some rich family. Doesn't look like he distinguished himself personally, but obviously an old blue blood sort. And I think she must have divorced him because he seemed to survive the marriage. And she married Robert Louis Chandler on June 3rd, 1950 in Dallas, and that would be why her name is Chandler. Again, Chandler must have got divorced with Chandler. He was a very successful and well-off lawyer subsequent to that. So apparently she does well in marriages, except they don't last very long. And then, according to this, she married Bob J. Gasway on December 31st, 1960. And her husband, Bob Gasway, died March 15th, 1962 in the crash in the Pacific of the Flying Tiger Line Flight 7815, operating as Military Air Transport Service Charter Flight 73914, originated at Travis Air Force Base with refueling stops at Honolulu, Wake Island, Guam, Clark Air Force Base, and was to terminate at Saigon, but it crashed before it got to Vietnam. And Find a Grave, apparently, here is quoting the Dallas Morning News, the co-pilot of the Flying Tiger plane missing in the Pacific on a flight from Guam to Manila is the husband of a Dallas woman. Robert Gasway, 38, was married about a year ago to the former Mrs. Gwyn Chandler. Mrs. Gasway is the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. George J. Greer. So this is our gal, and her husband, in 1962, died in a very famous air crash. And apparently the airplane just blew up without warning over the Pacific, and apparently this explosion was witnessed by a Liberian tanker, the SST Linzen, with an Italian crew, but they were watching it. They saw what apparently was a vapor trail of the airplane prior to the explosion. Then they saw an explosion, and they saw two pieces on fire fall to the ocean below. And they were 17 miles or so away from this, and they actually did go to try to see if there was anybody there that was associated with the wreckage. And they didn't find anything, so they continued on their way. And the official search and rescue operation found no piece of the plane whatsoever. It's a mysterious, famous crash. And Wikipedia even mentions those dreaded conspiracy theories. Flight 739 was one of two Flying Tiger Line flights with military connections that were destroyed under similar circumstances on the same day. This led both airline officials and the media to offer suggestions of sabotage and conspiracy. Both Flight 739 and the other aircraft, an L-1049 Super Constellation, departed from Travis Air Force Base at around 9:45 Pacific Standard Time on Wednesday, March 14, 1962, and both encountered difficulties several hours later. The other aircraft was carrying secret military cargo when it crashed in the Aleutian Islands and caught fire. Now, that aircraft did not disappear. It was determined to be pilot error, and I believe only one person died in that one. Flying Tiger Lines released a statement outlining some possible reasons for the two occurrences, including sabotage of either or both aircraft and kidnapping of Flight 739 and its passengers. The airline also said that these were merely wild guesses and that there was no evidence to support either theory. And according to the official investigation from the Civil Aeronautics Board, our boy's name was actually Gasway, Robbie J. Gasway, not Gasaway or Gasaway. So we have yet another spelling of the name, but obviously this is the husband of our girl Gwyn Gasaway, or whatever her name may be. And from the same report here, it says there was no cargo except for the cargo carried by the passengers, their personal cargo. And the passengers were 93 of the 96 passengers were members of the U.S. Army, mainly highly trained electronics and communications specialists. The other 3 were members of the Armed Forces of Vietnam. And with the Gasaway name in my toolkit, I find yet another document about Gwyn, spelling her name with the 2 Z's here from the FBI. So the FBI knows all the spellings, apparently. And this is a March 31st, 1964 document. What it says there is, on February 24th, 1964, and March 9th, 1964, the New York, I think a New York informant who was in a position to furnish reliable information, furnished the current mailing lists of the weekend and midweek editions of The Worker, respectively. The Worker is that communist newspaper that Oswald subscribed to. The name and address of an individual on either or both of these lists is attached above. And apparently, Gwyn Gasaway is a subscriber to The Worker. And that's what the informant is telling the FBI here. And here, December 27th, 63 FBI report, Mr. Robert W. Lee, Sugar House Station, Salt Lake City, Utah, by letter of December 23rd, 1963, advised this office he was entering a 1-year subscription to The Worker. He also advised he had recently ordered some extra copies of The Worker, and when he received these copies, a letter was in the package which had apparently been mistakenly included by The Worker publishers. This letter is dated 12/4/63, is signed by the subject, and the subject is Gwyn Gasaway, 708 Armstrong, Dallas 5, Texas. The letter is enclosed. And the letter is here. It's dated December 4th. It says, "Gentlemen, included is $2. I should like an extra copy of the November 26th Worker and the December 2nd issue. They are part of history, and I'd like to have them for a scrapbook. Sincerely, Gwyn G. Gasaway." And this note is dated 3 days before Harry McCormick called the FBI about the fact that he had been told by Gwyn Gasaway that she recognized the writing of Oswald as the writing on that note that she got from a worker back in February of 1963. So, I don't know what that means. It looks like, though it's not said explicitly, it looks as though Gwyn Gasaway is a subscriber to The Worker and wants extra copies which deal with the subject of the assassination. And I wish I could see her letter. What I think is that her letter was an anti-communist letter to the newspaper, and that the A worker was somebody who was pro-communist and was telling her that she's wrong. It seems I have time for a speculative interpretation, so here it is. Oswald and JD Tippit were both commies involved in a Cuban plot. I think that for other reasons. Robert Gasaway was a commie agent whom the FBI knew about and infiltrated by means of their asset, Gwyn Chandler. Robert Gasaway was a relative of Marie Tippit, and that's how he gained access to and recruited JD Tippit. Robert Gasaway somehow brought down Flight 739. Whether he went down with it or not, I don't know. Of course, I don't know anything. I'm just speculating here. But one of the problems I've had with my theory about all of this is, how did J.D. Tippit become a communist actor? And there's an answer now. He perhaps was recruited by a relative of his wife.